Murray, one small thing.
Yeah.
When you bring me out, can you introduce me as Joker?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Real Ripe and Real Rotten. This is a podcast where we use the Rotten Tomatoes website to determine the best and worst film in the filmography, and then we talk about them. And right now we're continuing our coverage of the 2020 or 2019, whatever you want to talk about. We're talking about the movies that came out in 2019 that are nominated for the Best Picture Oscar in January or February 2020. We talked about Parasite, which was the high at 99%. You can check that episode out. Now we're going to talk about Joker, which is the lowest rated of the Best Picture nominees at 68% on the Rotten Tomato meter. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. As a comic book fan, I do, there's a lot of controversy over this movie in terms of the message that it may or may not be putting forth, blah, 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 blah. The thing that bothers me is it really sets this precedent that the only character that can get you a critical acclaim is the Joker, which is really fascinating to me. It kind of makes sense.
You mean playing him, playing the Joker.
Yeah, playing him. Yeah, the only character that you can get critical acclaim for playing from the comic book seems to be the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
because
I know
of the Nolan, you're talking about the Nolan Heath Ledger version.
Yeah, Heath Ledger got a one
Nicholson
for Nicholson. Yeah, gets a lot of acclaim. I mean, not so much anymore, I think, but yeah, Ledger won an Academy Award. Joaquin Phoenix is probably going to win an Academy Award. Yeah, I just find it strange. Like if I was doing, I would give Robert Downey Jr. an Oscar for playing Tony Stark for 10 years, probably before I would give another Oscar to the Joker. And that's not to say I don't think he's good in this movie, because I do, and I think he's probably going to win. But like, it's really fascinating that apparently you can only get critical acclaim for playing this single character.
We'll talk about it right after this. Let's play the trailer just so people can be reintroduced to The Joker, which is a 2019 film, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about that point that we just stopped talking about.
Arthur, does it help to have someone to talk to?
My mother always tells me to smile and put on a happy face. She told me I had a purpose to bring laughter and joy to the world. Hey, stop them! Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by.
What?
If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you find that life is still worthwhile.
What's so funny?
Just
Freak!
Gotham's lost its way. What kind of coward would do something that cold-blooded? Someone who hides behind a mask.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a comedy.
if you just smile.
I think the thing about the Joker is that it's definitely a character that the Academy like it's a character that begs for a kind of performance that wins Best Oscar actor a lot.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of over the top. Like you're definitely acting when you're playing him. There's no subtlety to it whatsoever. But you can actually approach him in a lot of different ways that it doesn't come across as kind of like he's got enough depth to him, I guess, that he doesn't come across as like Thanos or something, where it's just like, you're not really sure what's going on. And I think that's pretty much what it is. Well, let's get these details out of the way. Joker is a 2019 American psychological thriller directed and produced by Todd Phillips. He co-wrote the screenplay with Scott Silver. Based on the DC Comics character, the Joker, it stars Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker and provides a possible origin story for the character. Set in 1981, which is news to me, it follows Arthur Fleck, a failed stand-up comedian whose descent into insanity and nihilism inspires a violent countercultural revolution against the wealthy in a decaying Gotham City. It's at 68% on the Rotten Tomatoes meter. The critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes is Joker gives its infamous central character a chillingly plausible origin story that serves as a brilliant showcase for its star and a dark evolution for comics-inspired cinema. All right. So where do we want to start with this one? I had not seen this one before we watched it for this. This is going to be the theme of this show, I think, going forward for these Oscar nomination type stuff. But I hadn't seen it before. This is my first time watching it. You had seen it before.
I had, yes. I saw it when it first came out at the height of the strange hysteria over it.
Yeah, do we want to start there?
Sure.
The hysteria is strange. It came out as if people are listening in the future to this, you probably remember it now if you're listening in contemporary times. But like this, there was basically a borderline moral panic that came out with this movie. It won the Palme d'Or. Is that the award that set off the whole thing?
It was either that or the Golden Lion or something.
Yeah,
it was one of those.
I think it won
Cannes
as best film or something.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
That just inspired a rash of left-leaning media, really, to just sort of say that this was like a primer. This is basically the what's that book that all the Oklahoma City bombers?
Oh, Jesus.
The Turner Diaries.
I was going to say the Anarchist Cookbook.
Oh no, this is the people are saying
one of those books that tells you how to make a bomb.
Yes,
basically.
yeah. Well, the Turner Diaries does that too, I guess. But the Turner's Diary is a narrative about, it sort of set up the whole thing about what these right-wing militias are trying to do in terms of the federal government. It was kind of a blueprint. And people were saying this is a blueprint for incel type angry young men to go out there and put on face makeup and then shoot people.
And well, even before it won, I think once the first trailer came out is when that stuff started, because I think everybody sort of, the people who were worried about it responded to what the trailer was apparently looking like, as though they were basically running it through what the lowest common denominator you could expect from a movie like this, which is, a glorifying of the villain who ends up becoming this mass murderer who's, and taking this character who is a disgruntled white guy, essentially, who then snaps and starts killing people and making him like the hero of the movie.
Yeah.
Which I get it. I understand when I first saw the trailer, I kind of felt the same thing where I was like, I don't know if this is exactly the movie we need right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know about you, but after I saw it, I didn't really feel like they were doing that at all, really.
Yeah. I liked this movie. I thought it was pretty good. I think that
I liked it. Sorry. I think I actually liked it a bit more the second time.
Yeah. I liked it. I think that it's, I think the main issue that I would have with it is that based on this like frenzy of what they said was going to happen with like the political outcome of this movie, it really doesn't have that point of view at all. It doesn't.
No.
It almost has no point of view about what's going on. It's really pretty detached from it, and it doesn't really take a strong stance either way, which is why it was so hysterical that the coverage of it was like, the coverage of it is responding to a movie that's not actually there. It's just responding to the idea of what this movie actually potentially could be, which
is usually how that stuff goes.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I found so interesting about it the first time I saw it. Is I said, as we were talking about it in the lobby afterwards, I said more or less the same thing, where I was like, for a movie that was being derided for having such a point of view about problematic stuff, this really doesn't take a stance on anything.
Where it was all about incel. There's no sexual component to this movie. People are like, the incels are going to get all fired up about this. It's like men who aren't getting laid are going to have a problem, and there's nothing really about that in this movie. He's not. I mean, he's obviously not having sex, but it's not like it's the major focus of that character that he's like he can't get over it or he's choosing not to or anything like that. So I didn't understand why they linked the two.
I think incel has kind of become a catch-all term for, just angry, disgruntled white guy.
Just antisocial male, young male.
Yeah.
But the term itself is based off in celibate, which is like you're actively choosing to not have sex because you either hate women or...
No. You are not actively choosing. It's involuntary celibacy.
Oh, that's true.
So
that's true,
you are not... It's the rest of the world that's preventing you from having sex, not the fact that you are really socially awkward. Or et cetera, et cetera.
Well, even if you're not involuntarily in celibate, the world is actively conspiring to stop you from having sex. It's just it's just a degree about whether you get mad at it or not.
Whoa, is this a men's rights podcast we're turning this into?
It's difficult. You get married. It's not. It doesn't even ease up. It's a constant struggle.
Oh boy! And then once they start having kids, forget it.
I know.
It's. I thought it was a really interesting look at this kind of character because he's got a bit of entitlement to him, but he's really not that much of like an entitled, disgruntled jerk. He's not like Michael Douglas in Falling Down.
No.
Where he's just like, the Korean guy yelled at me for the final time. This time I'm going to bash his head in. It's not that. It's really, he is a character who is the character he becomes the Joker really is created by the circumstances of the city in which he lives.
Yes.
Like he's been essentially forgotten by the mental health industry. He's got an entirely fucked up sense of who he is based on his mother.
Who's lying to him.
Who's lying to him, or maybe she's not. It gets a little gray towards the end, but I assume that she is.
Yeah, I think it implies more. I don't think there's nearly as much mystery as there could be in this about what's actual reality and what isn't. For as distorted as his state of mind is, I think that they clearly show you what the reality of the situation is, except for the one exception is his girlfriend, which they reveal very quickly that's like the fake a fake for sort of image he has.
I also, we could talk about that a little bit later, but I also have I tend to believe that the last like 10 minutes are also a bit of a fantasy, but obviously they don't really come down either way. But so yeah, his mother's messed him up. He has this affliction that pushes him away from everybody in society because it's so weird. He doesn't go out and buy a gun. The guy gives him a gun.
Yep.
The guy who is the person who everyone who was afraid this movie was going to prop up, that character is the one who gives him a gun. He's the essential catalyst of the shittiness, is this person that everyone was afraid was going to be like, glorified. And even once he starts killing people, it's not really like it's not a death wish kind of thing where
he doesn't become a rampage killer, which is interesting to me.
And he's not doing it because it's like, it's up to me to change things. All of his, until he snaps and turns into the Joker, all of his violence is very reactionary. It's not him like taking a step forward. It's him. He defends himself. And that of course gives him this weird, high, which I think it's, at the end of the day, the movie is a fairly accurate depiction of what this kind of character would be. It's not glorifying that character, but it's like, yes, this person who has some issues is given a weapon. He realizes that the weapon gives him a certain amount of power. Then he it doesn't make us, like we said, it doesn't really make a stance about this guy being great or what. It's pretty allows you to look at what he's doing and go like, yeah, this is not great.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, you have this character who is this murderer who's propped up by the response he gets because of the people he's murdered and X, Y, and Z. It's like, yeah, that's how that happens.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think that the movie is saying like that, you know, way to go, Joker.
Right.
You don't listen, do you? I don't think you ever really hear me. You just ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts. But you don't listen anyway. I said, for my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do. And people are starting to notice.
I think that what's kind of funny to me is that like I think it's actually an interesting movie because it's so derivative of Taxi Driver and 70s cinema in a lot of ways.
Have you seen King of Comedy?
I have not seen King of Comedy.
It's a lot more derivative of King of Comedy than Taxi Driver.
Yeah. I get that impression. That's the reason that De Niro's in this, right? That's
sure.
The holdover sort of reason. It's very derivative of that. And what's interesting to me is that I think that it actually works better as it's kind of backwards from what you would expect a superhero movie to be at this point, because I think it works better as a King of Comedy Taxi Driver knockoff than it does a Batman Joker movie. Because it almost feels to me that this doesn't even, he is a different Joker than the Batman Joker. Like they're just kind of referencing the fact that he looks this way and that he calls himself Joker and that there are the Waynes and everything. Like it clearly takes place in a Batman universe, but I get the sense that he is just more of a guy who becomes the Joker than it is a Joker movie. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And what I think is the best part of the movie and the most original take on it is that if you do look at it as a Batman universe thing, it's a dark mirror version of the Bruce Wayne story in a lot of ways, where he is right down to the fact that he thinks he is Thomas Wayne's son, just like Bruce, like he is Bruce's brother in his own head.
Right.
And so it's a kind of tale of like, what if Bruce Wayne had just gone down the unlucky path? Would he have become the Joker in that situation? And I think that's the best. I think that's the best point that the movie makes. I think its second best point is that it goes in this direction of being a Taxi Driver type thing, which is like a statement on mental health and like what people are driven to. And I think it's kind of heavy-handed in that regard. It's not like Taxi Driver where it's Taxi Driver and things like that seem more observational than this, which tends to tell you what's going on, which is right down to the worst scene of the movie for me is the final scene where he's on the talk show, which I think is terrible. But
yeah,
my final point would just be, I think that it actually doesn't work as a Joker movie because I don't really think this is a very interesting Joker character in a lot of ways. And my big problem with the movie is that when he, quote unquote, becomes the Joker, I don't see it enough in the vein of flipping the Batman story where Batman is a totally different avatar for Bruce Wayne than he actually is. Like he doesn't, when he becomes the Joker, he doesn't become this. If you're going to go down this incel angry young male path, when he becomes the Joker, he does not indiscriminately kill people at that point. And I think that the Joker character ends up that is the Joker character to me. And because he has this sort of strange code where he only kills people that wronged him and he lets go the little person coworker, he's like, you were nice to me, so I'm going to let you live. That doesn't feel particularly Jokerish to me. That feels more like the King of Comedy Taxi Driver route. And I think that it fails as a Joker movie in that his transformation into this character isn't as effective as I think it needs to be to make it a superhero movie.
Well, I don't think that it's trying to be a superhero movie. It's they've gone on record as saying that this Joker is they never planned on this Joker ever meeting Batman. It's just a character study using those parts inside of a known universe. And but
I don't really. That's like I sort of don't buy that a lot. Like, I think that if you're choosing to use this IP and this material, a little bit of something has to be bought into using. It'd be like me making an X-Men movie and saying none of these are mutants. It's just like I'm just using the X-Men abilities.
I think it's closer to Logan, where it's like they're using the IP for IP purposes, but they're using it to tell a fairly standalone story.
But he's still a superhero in Logan. He still has claws and is a healing ability and things like that. Like he's bound by the rules of that universe. And I feel that this one just, I think if you're going to use the Joker IP, I just I need him to move in that direction. Like if you want him to become this character by the end of the movie, I kind of need him to embrace what makes that character that way, instead of feeling like it's just the guy going on a Jeremy Pearl Jam-esque kill scene, and then he becomes the same guy as he was at the start, except he wears face makeup at that point.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, but I don't think it's any less of a read on the character. I don't think it invalidates it at all as using the character, because I mean they do this stuff in the comics all the time. It all depends on whoever's writing it, their read on the character. Like I mean, you know, Sean's Joker is a lot different than the Joker of most other comics, but he still reads as the Joker.
Yep.
And I think it's and if I would agree more with what you're saying, where I don't think that this Joker is the quote unquote the Joker from the Batman universe, as much as a guy who is just being labeled the Joker. And like, I know that there was even, I forget where I heard this, but I think that there was in the original script, the original ending for the movie was when he's in the mental hospital and he starts laughing, and she asks him, what are you laughing at? And he says, oh, I was thinking of a joke. And he said, you wouldn't get it. That was supposed to be a response to what he was seeing was actually someone killing the Wayne family and then also killing Bruce. So I think it operates in and of itself fairly well. The term I think they would use for it in comics is it's an Elseworld story. Elseworlds being a line of comics that DC did back in the late 80s and 90s, where it was essentially like, let's take a character that everybody knows and put him in a story that's just, you know, a ground up weird thing. So like, you know, Batman, but it's in 1800s London and he's fighting Jack the Ripper, or like, oh, what if the Green Lantern ring ended up in Batman's hand or Superman's hand, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so I think it's a fairly effective Elseworld story, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I see what you're saying about the Joker and indiscriminately killing people, and I don't know that he doesn't get to that point, because I mean, if you think about the end of the movie, I assume he kills the woman that he's talking to in the office or in the hospital, right? And I mean, she doesn't really do anything bad to him. So who knows if he's starting down that path of becoming a crazed and indiscriminate killer.
Yes.
Because at the end of the movie, he's seeing whether or not it's real or whether or not it's something that he's just conflating in his mind. He's seeing this throng of people responding to what he's doing in a way that he didn't see really before that sequence, because he was he says he doesn't care about that on the talk show or whatever, but at the end he clearly does.
Yeah, I guess just to like restate my case with it, I'll say that if this movie was not called it was not related to Batman, right? I think I have a better understanding of it. I think that if this movie was not Batman and we had no idea what Batman was, and this was like totally novel idea that he just calls himself the Joker, I think I would understand what's going on at that point, and I'd say that this is a pretty decent movie. Still kind of wonky towards the end. I'm not really sure about that, but because you're inserting the Batman thing on top of it, and I think you have to if you're using like directly related material, I just don't know. I think that there's space there for this Joker to, because it's a comic book, he kind of has to represent something bigger than just the mental illness aspect. I feel like in the way that that Batman represents something about Bruce Wayne, the Joker character to me should represent something about Arthur Fleck. And my problem with the talk show scene is that he's far too blunt and rational about what he's doing at that point. Like I wanted that talk show scene to be him embracing the bad comedian aspect. Like he is fully realized as this is what he what's that?
You should watch King of Comedy. That's basically how King of Comedy ends.
Yeah, but that makes sense to me. Like at that point he's doing his whole it's funny because the scene opens when he comes in. He does what I thought he was going to do. He's fully invested and he's like dancing out on stage. He's being very theatrical in a way that you'd expect the Joker kind of to be. But when he sits down, he reverts to the Arthur Fleck thing and he's just like, everyone is mean to me and I don't like this. I feel at that point, he's beyond that. And he's beyond feeling hurt by people and he's only going to lash out at everybody. And he does it in a way that the Joker does it by sort of like being disconnected by it. Like he's no longer impacted by it, but he's going to hurt everybody who led him to be that way. I just feel that the talk show scene is too much of like De Niro going like, it's not nice to hurt people. Like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And it felt like they were trying to course correct or something for what people were saying the movie was going to be about. And I didn't like that. I wanted him to really embrace insanity at that point and to show the downside of this, which is that he becomes an indiscriminate rampage killer. And I didn't want him to become a Batman, I have a code type killer, because that's not the way that character should work, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that I think I had a lot of high hopes for that scene as they were going into it, because I was thinking the same thing where I was like, oh shit, okay, this is when he finally gets to be the Joker. And yeah, he does it to a point until he kind of starts talking. And then he does just sort of talk fairly rationally.
As Arthur. He's Arthur at that point again, yeah.
Yeah, like they've played him in this way that once he stops taking his medication, he believes that he is a lot more clear and sees things for what it is now. It's like, my life is a comedy, blah, blah, blah. But they don't really do a good job of showing that that's not the case.
Right.
Because he seems, when he goes on to the thing, it's like, I understand him like recentering himself as this new character, but part of that recentering should be that his center is very much not the center of a normal person.
Right.
And when he starts talking in that whole scene, it's very much him talking fairly rationally and acting fairly and I don't know, maybe that's supposed to be scarier.
No, I
don't know, because the way he plays it is he's talking very directly about it, and he very consciously and like coldly makes a choice to kill Robert De Niro's character, and it doesn't feel like I think it's just missing that characterization in that scene.
I think it's too blunt and not symbolic enough at that point. Like if you're going to do this in a movie, I think you have to have him do a very symbolic or thematic move at that point, instead of just breaking down the point of the movie really for Robert De Niro. And
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just think that I would I think you can have the same dialogue essentially between the two of them, but you have to Joker up the way that he's talking about it. Like you have to show that something is broken in him at this point, and he can fully. I don't know if they do this, but I was thinking that like one of the things touches that I really liked was that when he's Arthur and he has his laughing fits, Phoenix plays it like it's painful for him. Like he doesn't want to do it. But I think that in the talk show scene, when he embraces this, the laughter should just come to him, and he doesn't fight against it at that point. Like he embraces it and sort of builds with it and goes off, and all of his dialogue should just be laughter built around laughter. And I don't think they do that, but that would have been the turning point that I was hoping that they would make.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that they didn't just, commit to ripping off King of Comedy, because the thing that makes the ending of King of Comedy so great is it essentially plays out the same way, where Robert De Niro's character ends up on the talk show that he idolizes, and he gets to do 5 minutes of stand-up. And he's such a pathetic character. All of his entire stand-up routine is just him telling truths about his life.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody is laughing at it like it's the most hilarious thing they've ever heard. But you know, having just watched the movie, that everything he's saying is true and is really fucking depressing.
Yep.
And it's this really great tonal clash where the response of the audience to what he's saying and the way it's being presented, it's just a really, really genius way to end the movie and wrap up the story. And I kind of wish they had just ripped that off wholesale.
Right.
And just done the same thing where it's like, yeah, now the Joker is telling quote unquote jokes, but he's being serious even though he's laughing about it, and he's telling these quote jokes that everybody's responding to, but he's telling these horrible truths about his own life.
Right. It shows it's the divide between the haves and the have-nots in this movie, which is very, very thematically similar to Parasite in a very funny way. We talked about that on the Parasite episode, but they're largely dealing with the same themes across both of them.
Except he walks up the stairs to get to his house.
I thought that too, and I was like, they got it backwards. He should go down the stairs to go back to his thing. Yeah, and I think that the difference between the two movies and why I think Parasite is a quote unquote better movie is that Parasite is much more the thematic and aesthetics of Parasite is kind of what I wanted the end of this movie to be. I didn't want it to be so blunt and unoriginal. And what Parasite does is it kind of disguises what it's talking about, and it doesn't have characters. Some of the disguising is not very subtle in a lot of ways, like going up and down the stairs, but the characters aren't openly just talking about it in that kind of a way. And they are here, and I feel that that's why this is kind of a lower tier Best Picture nomination. I would be upset if this one won Best Picture because I don't think it's that good of a quality movie or film.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a bad one either. I just think that it kind of makes a couple of those missteps, and I think that that's the big thing. But all through the movie leading up to that point, I thought it was really good in maybe somewhat heavy-handedly showing the plight of class struggle and mental illness and things like that. But what I really liked about that was that it showed you the Batman story from a sort of dark mirror perspective about how the Waynes would be perceived and things like that. And I thought that was really clever. And I liked the way that they tied in the use of Thomas Wayne just offhandedly calls the lower classes clowns, and so everyone starts dressing up like clowns, and he buys into it. I like that he kind of stumbles into what I thought is the most Jokerish scene of all, where he lures the cops onto the subway car and starts a fight, which gets the cops caught up in it. So he causes some chaos that indirectly fixes his problem for himself. And I like stuff like that.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of people, Batman comic fans, really upset at the way that they portray Thomas Wayne in this movie. And it's like, I get it, you know.
From this point of view, it makes sense, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and also Thomas Wayne, the billionaire, in reality, probably not going to be the best, most likable person on the planet. And it's like, yeah, in the fantasy of comic book world, he is a benevolent billionaire.
Yeah,
but
it was the Nolan version of him, is my memory of him right, where he was a noble-hearted guy who was kind of naive. Was that the way Nolan portrayed him?
He's definitely noble-hearted. I guess you could maybe call him you don't really spend enough time with him to really get a read on it, because you only get him in a couple scenes. And I mean, the biggest change I think is that Thomas Wayne is generally referred to as he was a doctor. He's not just a
inventor.
A capitalist billionaire. Yeah. He's a doctor, so at his core he has this, sense of doing good for the city and the people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
they definitely they choose to play him essentially like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Although that's probably giving Trump too much credit, unfortunately. But
they do portray them like it's fairly fairly tropey. Like they like the opera in this. Like he sneaks in as a working class guy to talk to Thomas Wayne, and he has to sneak into the opera where it's a bunch of guys in suits just laughing at things, and he's never going to be a part of it and stuff. But they definitely, what I think was interesting in that is that I think that you can portray Thomas Wayne that way if it's done more through Arthur's perspective of Wayne. But you spend quite a bit of time with the Waynes in this movie. I was surprised by that. You have an extended scene with Bruce as a little kid. You have a lot of conversation with Thomas. And I just thought that he was going to, if their perception of the Waynes was entirely through his mother's eyes and the mediated response about what Wayne is, I could see him drawing weird conclusions about him. Instead, he talks to him, and the heavy-handedness of the film is just like, yeah, he's a billionaire, therefore he must be a dick to this guy.
Well, I don't entirely read it that way, because I think given the circumstances of when you encounter the Waynes, they react fairly accordingly.
You mean with accosting him in the garden or whatever on the front door?
Yeah, he sneaks up to the house, he puts his fingers in Bruce's mouth.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad Bruce learned how to fight eventually in his life, because he's a pretty wet blanket in this movie.
Yes.
But like Alfred comes over and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And his mother is a known quantity as being like an insane person who's been hassling them for a long time.
Yeah. But isn't Wayne's first media interview for the mayor a fairly indicting scene where he calls everyone clowns, right? And
yeah.
Like
I think he does. I couldn't remember if he actually does that on camera or if it's just something that somebody says.
I think he says it on camera. And I guess the way that you would spin that, if you wanted to, is that it's kind of like Clinton's deplorables comment, which is she's talking about a certain subset, but her political enemies just took it to mean anyone who doesn't support her is what she's talking about. And this is not a defense of Hillary Clinton, but that's my understanding of like listening to what she said in that situation. I don't know if Wayne, I don't remember if Wayne is kind of saying the same thing, where he is talking about some set of crime that's going on and he calls those people clowns, and he's not referring to everybody.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the scene where Arthur meets him in the bathroom, he's a little, before they really engage, he's a little bit cold, but he's actually not an asshole.
Yeah.
Because he's like, "Hey, what do you want, an autograph or something?" Like, he's just going about his business, and this guy, as someone who is being looked at weirdly by a weird guy. Then once he finds out who he is, I feel like he responds fairly accordingly.
Yeah.
He's like, "Listen, stop coming near my family, and I'm going to punch you because you touched my son, you fucking weirdo."
Yeah.
Which I mean, I guess that's part of the thing or whatever, but it's like, I don't blame him for responding that way. But through the Arthur lens, yes, he comes off as an awful, holier than thou, cold billionaire.
Yes, who doesn't accept him as his true son because he keeps insisting that his mother is lying about things like that.
What's really funny is that apparently Alec Baldwin was supposed to play that role. And watching it again this time, knowing that, I was like, "Oh my God, these are all Alec Baldwin lines." Yeah. Like he would have nailed all of this.
Yeah, it's a guy I didn't recognize, a guy who's apparently in Dark Knight Rises, but I don't recognize him.
Yeah. He's a guy. He's one of those guys where you're like, "Oh yeah, I've seen him in stuff." I have no idea what though.
Yeah, the strangest casting to me is De Niro, who is not appropriate whatsoever for the role that they cast him in here. Where he's playing a late night talk show host, and I just don't think that Robert De Niro is really all that funny. He's funny when they cast him in roles where he has to play the sort of straight man to things like Meet the Fockers and stuff. He's not the joke character or the joke actor that you want to bring out, and I just don't think that his show would be anywhere near successful as it's claimed to be in this movie if De Niro is actually the host of that comedy special or a comedy show.
Have you ever seen him on Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, it's pretty.
He's the worst I've ever seen on Saturday. Like he having to read cue cards just snaps his brain.
Yeah,
and he's just really, really bad at it.
Yeah, he's not innately funny. He's not a innately funny actor who can sort of do what he like. In some sense, it makes me wonder how good of an actor De Niro is, because it seems like he kind of does. He got in with those kind of Kings of Comedy taxi driver roles and things like that, and he sort of blazed a path for those kind of characters. But his roles are always a version of that, really, and he doesn't do successful comedies. He's never done anything really outside of that realm. He has every once in a while because he's made 50,000 movies. But I think he's very good at what he does, but he doesn't have a lot of variety to what he can do.
Yeah, I just think he's, at least in the last 20 years or so, he's just been on kind of autopilot.
Yeah, it's probably true.
And I mean, I don't think he completely phones it in here, but it's not the best performance I've ever seen from him. But he doesn't have a ton to do.
Yeah, I don't think he's phoning it in. I just think it's not. You need someone actively high energy, funny in that role.
And not to turn this into the King of Comedy podcast, which I would like to do, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to do the B-rolls thing, just as a concept, is because I wanted to talk about King of Comedy eventually, when we eventually do the Scorsese whatever. The thing that makes it work, one of the things that makes it work so well is the two contrasting characters are Robert De Niro playing this weird loner who wants to be a comedian but isn't funny, up against Jerry Lewis, who is essentially is the role that De Niro is playing in Joker, essentially.
Right.
Jerry Lewis as this believable comedy talk show host, because it's Jerry Lewis, but who also has this really like hard edge to him that you kind of don't expect. And those things work together really well. Whereas in this one, it's, I wish they had, they should have cast David Letterman or something.
Yeah.
Which actually would have been really fun, because that talk show sequence is very reminiscent of a talk show sequence from The Dark Knight Returns, the comic.
Okay.
And the talk show host in that is
styled actor.
His name is David Endocrin, I think.
David
he's drawn exactly like David Letterman. And even down to the fact that in the comic, Dr. Ruth is on the show with the Joker, and in this one it's some other fictional sex therapist.
Fictional. Yeah. No, it's the movie definitely draws its inspiration very obviously from situations and setups and stuff like that, be it the Kings of Comedy or Taxi Driver or Dr. Ruth or things like that. I don't know. I did like it. I thought a lot about the movie when it was over, and I really think that's really my main problem. Other than that, I don't really have much to criticize about it outside of I think it's slightly heavy-handed every once in a while, but it's sometimes difficult to get around that kind of stuff. And I just wish that the ending had been a little bit stronger. But I will say it's a little bit of like a blue ballsing performance where it made me realize why the Ledger performance is really good. And I know that they're different Joker characters, where the Ledger Joker is the chaotic force of nature character who doesn't need to make sense, really. He can kind of come and go as he pleases because he's not really a person in a lot of ways. This one is much more grounded, where he is a person who becomes this type of a character. I just, so much of the Joker character is built on the laugh, I think, and the Ledger laugh is just the pinnacle of the Joker laugh, I think. For me, I know Hamill gets a lot of praise for his laugh, too.
Yeah, I actually think Joaquin Phoenix's laugh is great, because he actually has like 3 different laughs that he does. Like my favorite part of this character is the different laughs, because he's got the one laugh which is the painful laugh, but then he's got the other laugh which is very much a put on laugh that he does, because he doesn't get jokes, right? And he doesn't get humor, and he has this affected laugh that he does that's really high pitched and weird, that he does it really inopportune times when he thinks a joke is something funny has happened. Yeah. So it's this great scene where he's at a comedy club and everybody's laughing, and he's like looking around trying to gauge what's funny, and he keeps laughing at the wrong bits of the joke. And you see his notebook where he's like analyzing what makes the jokes work, but still not understanding them. Yeah. It's actually, I think it's really, I hesitate to say genius because it's an acting performance, but it's a really interesting take on it, because he's got Ledger did something different, but kind of in the same realm, where he kind of had the 2 Jokers, where he had the regular Joker and then he had like the evil Joker, where he would get like really intense, like once or twice. Yep. And it's sort of the same idea, but it's definitely played more as a larger part of the character in this one.
Yeah. I guess the reason that like I just intrinsically see the Joker as being related to Batman. I have a hard time visualizing or understanding why he would exist outside of Batman. And even in this movie, his actions create Batman indirectly. And like, because of that, I walk away from this movie going, what does this Joker's Batman look like? Like, what kind of Batman would have a hard time with this guy, sort of? And I think that's why the Ledger version is, to me, the more interesting way to take that character. Not that this is a fault of this movie. It's just a difference in like what I would expect from that character, because the Ledger version feels like someone who is actually threatening in a lot of ways. And this guy's threatening because he has a gun, but I don't know if that's the best way to take the idea of what that character is supposed to be, even if it's in a more realistic setting like this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's the kind of thing where you have to decide whether or not divorcing it works for you. Because like when I first heard that they were doing this, I was like, what, they're going to do a Joker movie like without Batman? What the hell's the point? The same way I felt about Venom, where it's like Venom is so intricately tied to Spider-Man.
Born of Spider-Man, yeah.
Yeah, literally. It's difficult to picture a Venom movie that doesn't feature Spider-Man. And I still wish that it had featured Spider-Man, but I actually enjoyed Venom a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Based similar to this movie, based almost entirely on the performance of Tom Hardy as Venom.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it. I was.
What's nice is that this movie can't. You can't serialize this franchise at this point. You know what I mean?
I think they're gonna try like hell to do it.
They're going to make a Joker too. I mean, it made a ton of money. This is the only R movie to make $1 billion, I guess. I was reading.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Because I can't see, if you have a sequel and you don't bring Batman into it, I don't know what that movie is at that point.
Right. Yeah. What's the point?
And I don't know what the version of Batman that works in this universe is. I really have no idea what kind of Batman that would be.
What's so funny?
Just think of a joke.
Do you want to tell it to me?
If I was going to spitball it, I would say it would probably be a manifestation of the Joker himself. So imagine the entire thing is like him at Arkham telling a story. And so then you have Batman through the eyes of this Joker, which would mean Batman is probably kind of a schmuck.
Yeah, I'm picturing that Batman, the Funny or Die Batman.
Yeah, exactly. The Pete Holmes Batman. I 100% would watch that movie. 100% would watch that movie. But yeah, I would imagine that the Batman of the Joker universe would be kind of a dickhead.
Yeah.
And probably not portrayed in the best light.
Could be another inmate in Arkham. You know?
Yeah, if you want to go that route where it's like, one of those things where you, like that Buffy episode I love, where they pull out and she's just in the sane asylum and you see all the elements of the Buffy universe are elements of that asylum that she's, run through her insane brain. That would be a little stock, I think. I don't know if that would be worth doing.
I wouldn't want to see a sequel. I wouldn't want to see a follow-up. I think it takes it I am able to divorce this from the Batman universe, and I think it works as a standalone thing. But if you wanted to like reintegrate this into something bigger than that, I just don't think that this is the movie that really supports it.
If my theory, I don't even know if I would call it a theory, but like I have a feeling they are going to try and appropriate this Joker and use him in other stuff. So I think they probably, because it's I think, what's his name? What's Phillips? Todd Phillips?
Todd Phillips, yeah.
I think Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix are involved enough with the creation of this movie that they probably can't do this unless they both agree to it. But it wouldn't surprise me if they angle really hard to get Joaquin Phoenix to play the Joker in an upcoming Batman movie. Not have it be literally a quote-unquote sequel to this one, but it's just he's doing it again.
As a different character, essentially?
Yeah, it's like it's the same character, it's the same actor, it's the same, he's playing the Joker, but this is not a sequel to Joker. So like if you look at the Robert Pattinson Batman, which for all intents and purposes is probably going to take place in modern times and or the future. If they just said, okay, we're having the Joker, Joaquin Phoenix is going to play the Joker in that. So it's not like it wouldn't make sense because he would be like 40 years older by that point.
Yeah, that's the other funny thing. Yes, the funny thing about the timing is that apparently Batman's fighting a geriatric Joker in this this universe.
So like that's like it wouldn't surprise me if they try to do something like that where they just like they don't make a sequel, but they do try to get him to play the Joker again in some other form.
Sure. So it's really just the actor playing a different version of the character because there's no way. Yeah. I think one of the major thing that prevents this character from fitting into the Batman universe, in my opinion, is that he's not really smart enough. Like he never, he's I wouldn't say he's dumb, but he's not, even in his final act of vengeance, he's not particularly thoughtful or clever about what he does.
Right.
And I just, if you were to import this Joker into another Batman or DC movie, he would seem very odd and out of place as a Joker character in some of those movies. So I think that's really the problem. And maybe that's what I found disappointing a little bit on some ways, where I was expecting that final scene to be, the final talk show scene to be like sort of witty and clever and full of life and sort of poetic about what was going on. And it really wasn't. And that was the final chance for him to be that character in the way that Travis Bickle has his final shootout scene where he becomes sort of he becomes that sort of crazed character for just a scene and then it's over.
Yeah. I also found it interesting in the movie that they refer to him as a vigilante. Yeah. After killing those 3 guys in the subway. And it's like, that's pretty sure that's just a murderer. It's not like he stopped a crime or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it was the only witness was that woman that they were throwing French fries at, so she gave a very negative portrayal.
She didn't see it either.
Yeah,
she didn't see it. She left the car. She moved into another car.
Yeah.
I think they. It's a little disappointing, because I think they just don't stick the landing, because I think if the first half of the movie is the run up to the vault. And then him turning into the Joker is actually hitting that trampoline and doing all the flips in the air. I think they nail that part. It's just when he comes down on the other end, I think, that he buckles his knee a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think, for better or worse, I mean, it's already happened. They've created an iconic version of the character. Like that stairway dancing thing is already like an icon.
Yep.
And that's an iconic piece of cinema, whether or not you want to admit to that or not. That's what it is. And it's just, it's disappointing that they couldn't like really stick it at the end and be like, this is the Joker. This is, he's really turned into this other character. They do kind of like back off a little bit. Yeah.
I think that they don't want to blame him or they don't want to hold him up as heroic in a sense. Like, I think that if he becomes that character and is like a very fulfilling, like satisfying execution of what that role is, I think it's hard to disguise that as anything other than heroic. I think intelligent people would know that what he's doing is not particularly heroic at that time, but I think that would fit into these sort of like incel nonsense that they were talking about, where it's like, well, they're portraying him as the getting over on the guys that harmed him, and it's a very insulting take on movie audiences where it's like people aren't going to be able to understand this. Like you can't show people things because they'll just copy it. I don't know. It's too strange.
I mean, do they not? I feel like it's tough to avoid that either way, because in that scene, his whole thing is that he's like, I'm the result of what happens when you give a person with a mental illness a gun and run them over by society.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's the point of the movie. But having him say it out loud, I feel like almost makes it semi-heroic in what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess it depends. You can really take away either version of that, because I think that's where it doesn't really make a stand, because it's stating a fact, essentially.
Well, that's why I need him to be a rampage killer and not have a code. Because at that point, if he does not have a code, it's showing you how leaving people who are in Arthur Fleck's position, who they can't be helped, lead to something that harms everybody. And it's not just it's not just don't be mean because someone will come back and shoot you. It's you could just be at the supermarket or in a movie theater and some psycho who's been taunted his entire life comes in with a gun and you had nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the thing that the film fails at, is that his code makes it just seem like it's good to get back at your bullies. And I think that the damage that society does to people is broader than that. And it's more dangerous because it impacts people who had nothing to do with it in the first place. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. In Dark Knight Returns, I don't know why I was kind of expecting this to happen, because I was thinking of the Dark Knight Returns scene. In Dark Knight Returns, they bring Joker onto the talk show under the guise that he has been successfully rehabilitated at Arkham by this, full of himself doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And when he comes on the show, he acts fairly restrained, and then he kills the entire audience with a gas bomb.
Yeah.
And part of me was kind of hoping isn't the word, but for a second I was like, for a second I was like, it would make sense if he did that, because that's what the Joker would do. Instead, he just kind of like we were saying, he very kind of gives like a fairly down the middle summation of what the movie's about.
Yep. And then executes the one person who wronged him in that case, who was cruel to him. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I feel like if I remember thinking I was surprised that it was so, the conversation was so even keeled in that scene. Like, I expected De Niro's character to just be like jumping on everything he said with a joke, or, like something that's going to make him pissed off and mad. Yeah. And then, then he starts doing the laughing thing, and then he turns into the Joker essentially. But yeah, it's a pretty down the middle. I expected more of a modern comedian take where someone like Bill Burr goes on a talk show and says something, the audience gives that sort of like group of like, oh, like they're sort of pearl clutching. I expected him to do that, something like that, where he becomes a comedian character, but it's in response to the people who are watching this performance of him. And he's like, he gives, something along the lines of like, how dare you judge me, basically, but do it in more of a Joker-ish way. And then, everyone kind of gets, more people die, I think, unfortunately, in the version I think that is more true to what this character should represent. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, before we wrap up, I did want to mention, the first time I watched it, it didn't occur, like it hit me a little bit, but it wasn't until I thought about it after, and especially when I watched it again, that I realized how funny this movie actually is. Mm-hmm. It's because the first time I watched it was at the height of the tension surrounding it, and I heard about how dark it was and how violent it was. So I was kind of on edge already as it began. But there's a few bits in it where I was like laughing out loud, and then I kind of felt bad about it at the time, because I was like, no, this is a serious movie about the Batman character, the Joker. Yeah. But when he walks into the sliding door. Oh my God, I lost it. I was like one of 5 people in the theater, I think, that laughed at that. Because for the same reasons, where I think people were like, you can't laugh at this movie. This is a serious. And it comes off of a scene where he's about to be accused of a crime, basically. Like it's not a funny scene that leads into it. But there's like a bunch of stuff like that. He's actually a pretty funny character. Like when he gets the gun and he starts dancing around in his living room and having this like conversation like he's at a club, and they're like, hey, what's up? Your dancing's really good. And he's like, thanks, I know. Yeah. And like the line delivery of when his friends or the guys come over and they're like, how you doing? And he's like, I'm great. I just killed my mother. I feel fine. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually a pretty funny movie, even down to like there's lots of like little Easter eggy references and stuff. My favorite of which being his name, which I have to imagine is on purpose. Arthur Fleck, A. Fleck, Affleck.
Oh,
Batman villain, the Joker. Batman played by Ben Affleck. Yeah. I have to imagine that's on purpose.
Yeah. That's not a comic, even some old comic reference.
No.
Okay.
No. But yeah, it's a pretty funny movie. And it's I think it handles its tone pretty well, where it swings the pendulum pretty far in both directions, where it's like horrible violence and stuff that's actually fairly laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel weird about it, which is kind of good.
Should it win Best Picture?
No.
Should it win Best Director?
Probably no.
Yeah, I think it's. I'd feel better if it won Director than Picture. I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I want it to win either. Because I think the biggest problem with it is it's everything is on Joaquin Phoenix's back in this movie.
Yeah.
Like if you take him out and if you actually like listen to the script isn't really very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just his performance is what's holding the entire thing together.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it. My guess is that he will win Best Actor, but I don't think it's going to win anything else. At least not the big ones.
Yes, I would agree with that. I'm just trying to look at it has Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor. It's leading the nominations with 11. The other ones must all be technical because they're not listing what they are. I thought the music was good. I barely ever noticed music, but I thought the music was good. I like the coloring on it. Whoever did the color was really good in this. Like I think that the color is very evocative of mood and things like that.
It looks great.
And it looks good. I think the cinematography is nice when they film him when he's doing his little dances. I think that they do a good job of that kind of stuff. Yeah. I think it's a really solid movie that I don't have any real problems with outside of I think that they botched the ending a little bit or they don't quite choose a lane in what they want to do with the character. But I don't think it deserves Best Picture, but it's not anywhere near Bohemian Rhapsody from last year.
No. Yeah. No, it's way better than that. I mean, it's visually it's fantastic. Like one of my favorite shots is that shot where he's waiting to go on the show at the end.
Yep.
And he's like cast in this blue light and he's got those multicolored curtains behind him that are lit up. It's a really good looking movie.
Yeah. Very, very, all the colors are sort of subdued in that 70s style. It's all sort of like saturated or desaturated or something.
Looking at the Best Actors, I don't know how he doesn't win this. Just because.
Who are the other ones? DiCaprio?
It's Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory, which is not something I've heard of. DiCaprio for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Adam Driver for Marriage Story, and Jonathan Pryce for The Two Popes.
Okay.
Like I feel like they're not going to give it to DiCaprio again, and those other three movies are fairly under the radar.
I've only heard buzz about him, so I guess it would be shocking in any other sense. Like you hear the other movies sort of pivoting around, or other nominees or other awardees pivoting around, and people making different cases for them. But I haven't heard anything except for him.
Yeah, and something else I was going to say. I don't remember. Just as another tag on the funniest of this movie, the scene at the hospital where he drops the gun is fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Like the first time I watched it, it was more of like a scene, but then I watched it again, and the way that they play that is just, is really good.
Yeah, no one reacts to it really. Everyone's just kind of standing there like in shock about what has happened to him.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it for Joker 2019, the lowest rated of the Best Picture nominations. Thank you guys very much for listening. You can support the show at patreon.com/thepensky file. It's the best way to do it. $2 a month gets you extra podcasts. Otherwise, you can listen to all the other shows. There's the Star Trek podcast. There's the Rotten Horror Picture Show, which Clay and Amanda are doing. And I think that's pretty much it. We'll be back with the B-roll for this, maybe before the Oscars, maybe not. We'll see. The Oscars are on Sunday, so we have a limited time here to get that done. But I think we're going to do Marriage Story, I think. Is that right?
Yes, it is, you cheating son of a bitch. I don't know. I assume that's what the movie's about. Is it about people yelling at each other for cheating? I assume that's what it is.
I think he has an affair. Yeah, but we'll see. I think we'll do Marriage Story. The other ones are, this one's Marriage Story is easy to get on Netflix, and the other ones I'm not interested too much in watching at this point. So the Marriage Story seems like it'll be an easy one to to get through, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, I think you covered everything.
All right. I guess we're done with that. That's Joker. It was not as shocking as I expected it to be. I was pleasantly surprised by it, though. I thought it was pretty good. And it just won't win Best Picture, which is what we're talking about here. But do you have any... You saw 1917, I guess, right?
I did, yes.
Is that your predictive... Unless Marriage Story blows your socks off, are you going to say 1917 is going to win?
I kind of hope Parasite wins, honestly, because I think it would be an interesting evolution and a much needed evolution for a movie like that to win. 1917 it's really good, but it's essentially just a technical feat. It's like a roller coaster ride essentially through World War I.
Yeah.
And your mileage will vary on that. I've heard people refer to it as it's like a big video game cutscene, and it's like,
it's kind of dismissive to say that.
Yeah, it is, because I mean it's unbelievable looking. It's that probably should win Best Cinematography because it's unbelievable looking, and just the camera work that they had to do to make it come off the way it did is astounding. And I find it weird that people are dismissing it because of the gimmick, because it's like, that's the gimmick. That's the ride.
Yeah, it's built around that idea. So it's not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like going into a Friday the 13th movie and being like, I just didn't like the fact that it was a horror movie. It's
right,
like, well,
right. It was built... Why was it built around this guy killing people? That seems like a real gimmick, yeah.
That's kind of what the setup is. So, I mean, if you're in for it in that sense, I think it's great. I think it's a roller coaster ride that gives you a little bit of everything from World War I, in a way that I've never seen put on screen before. And I mean, maybe that's to its detriment because it does try to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I think it's unbelievably well made. So
I'll try to watch a couple more and see if I change my mind. But so far, yeah, I guess.
I bet my guess is Tarantino's going to get Best Director.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Looking at the other ones, so it's kind of been up in the air. Like, there's no clear runaway favorites really for me in terms of this. Like, I felt much more strongly about last year's stuff, but we'll see how it goes. I guess we'll have in a couple days. All right, we'll try to get Marriage Story out of the way before the Oscars. If not, it'll be right around afterwards. It's not going to win anyway, so I think we're not going to miss out on stuff. But that's it for Joker. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.